And when they opened up the sample chamber inside this clean room, they had bacillus bacteria was found in the clean room from Ryugu.
The same day, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened.
Welcome to this episode of Hydroplate Theory University with Hydroplate Theory experts Kevin Lee and Bill Wells.
Well, again, welcome, audience, to hptuniversity.com. This is our 6th episode. 2 are in our podcast under the introduction link on our webpage at hptuniversity.com. 2 of them were then devoted to doing a big overview and introduction to Dr. Brown's overview chapter of the 9th edition of his book. Last week, we covered the chapter, that overview, the introduction to the asteroid chapter. And this is part 2 of that asteroid, meteorite, trans-Neptunian object. Last week, we ended after defining what asteroids, meteors, dwarf planets, even comets to a certain extent are, and how all of the evidence coming back from space is that these objects of our solar system actually had their origin in the fountains of the great deep rupturing up in one day about 5,000 years ago, somewhere close to that, when the water coming up from the subterranean chamber jettisoned material into space. And some of it was material that just went up and became the sedimentary layers on Earth, but some of it was ejected with enough velocity to become the asteroids and comets. The one thing that's in the chapter that we didn't cover last week are trans-Neptunian objects. So we're going to start out by looking at that. And then we're going to be seeing some news items that came up this week that have really shaken people. That kind of goes along with what Astro Alexandra said last week in our study, where she goes, they found amino acids and nucleotides on Bennu. Well, we're going to see another news article that deals with that, and again emphasize that the hydroplate theory and only the hydroplate theory gives a good explanation for that. Last week we ended with this table 16, just as a reminder for those that are going in sequence with our podcast, and showing that the hydroplate theory answers the enigmas that are really causing heartache with the evolutionary-minded people, Big Bangers, because they can't explain what they're finding, but the hydroplate theory does. And now we're going to go to the one other orbiting body of our solar system that we didn't talk about last week, and that was trans-Neptunian objects. So here's a picture of the solar system with the planets. So the closest is Mars, and then we have the next closest planet is Venus, then Earth, and then we have Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And the key is that this is the last created planet, that is in our solar system in orbit around the sun. And so anything that orbits past this, including Pluto, which was for a planet for a while, but it got demoted because they realized even the secular scientists will call it a trans-Neptunian object, which means a trans-Neptunian object is an object that spends some or all of its time orbiting the sun past the orbit of Neptune. And Pluto, sometimes it's in the orbit of Neptune, and other parts of its orbit are outside the orbit of Neptune. But secular scientists now are thinking it's a compilation of millions of comets, which is exactly what it was. Pluto is an asteroid/comet that was a massive debris pile spinning out from the Earth after it was jettisoned from the Earth. It came together with a massive amount of material that became 1 million comets all together, and that's going to be explained in detail if you watch, like we encouraged you to do last week, you watch Brian Nichols' YouTube channel on the formation of asteroids and TNOs. Trans-Neptunian objects is any minor planet orbiting the sun at a greater average distance than Neptune. There's 70,000 TNOs out there with diameters greater than 62 miles. Powerful telescopes can see 2,300 of the 70,000. The rest of them are determined by their gravitational perturbations of other orbiting bodies. So there's a lot of TNOs out there. And once again, here's the logic of origins of trans-Neptunian objects. All green. It's all green, except for, and the evolutionary solar system, it's mostly red and yellows. The only yellow is bacterial life on Pluto. And that's not because they don't have evidence of bacterial life on Pluto, because they do, because there's methane on Pluto, but they haven't found it yet. They haven't been able to say there is a bacteria here because we haven't landed on Pluto like we've landed on Ryugu. And so only HPT can explain how comets, asteroids, and TNOs are floating rock piles. Some with moons, some that are contrary binary, and moons with contact binary. We covered this last week. And then I want to emphasize my conversation with Dr. Christina Thomas that I alluded to last week. On April 29th, she's in charge of the DART, Dual Asteroid Redirection Test, where we smashed into the moon called Dimorphos, the moon of an asteroid Didymus, and the results were shocking. And she's in charge of the analysis of that. Associate professor of the Department of Astronomy and Planetary Science at Northern Arizona University, or PhD from MIT on planetary science. And when I said this top paragraph, only HPT can explain everything that we're finding, when I stuck my head in her office and she gave me, graciously gave me a few minutes to talk to her, she didn't say, get out of my office. We know where all those things came from. We can explain everything. Get out of here. She didn't do that. And then what I did is I told her, let me give you one secret. Like I said last week, one secret, they had an atmosphere. And she ended up saying, you're right. That would explain, especially the DART. She said it would explain the DART dilemma, Dual Asteroid Redirection Test. And I want to emphasize when people say, well, how could the Earth have jettisoned all of this material into space? I mean, that's a tremendous amount of energy, and it is. And Walt calculates the amount of energy, and he also calculates the amount of energy available to eject the material based on the radioactivity chapter, which we'll get to later on. And we have to understand that one of the problems with figuring out how could there have been that much energy for all these things that are so heavy, so dense, so much mass. Well, one of the things they found out by smacking into Dimorphos is the mass was way less than what they thought it was going to be. And so a common misconception is that asteroids are the remains of a large planet that mysteriously exploded long ago. Today, there is hardly enough material in the asteroid belt to make a small moon. And that's from a Nature magazine. That's from a Big Banger, that there really isn't that much. And that's even including the fact that they think there's a whole lot more mass than there is. So even though there's a lot of items out there, it's a lot less than what they think. And so the energy that people say that Walt's deficient on because he doesn't have the energy, they ignore the reduced mass, and they ignore the fact that the evidence is overwhelming that he's right. You can't say it couldn't have happened when all the evidence says it did happen. And they've been wrong about density of comets and asteroids ever since they went to space. So now here's an article that came up this last week, July 15th, 2026. Alien world chemistry found inside meteorite that struck New Jersey home. So there's two articles that came out. There was a meteorite that came, and a meteor going through the sky hit Earth, so now it becomes a meteorite as soon as it lands on Earth. It crashed through a roof into the carpet of a house. The people got gloves, picked it up to not contaminate it, knowing what it was, got it to a clean room quickly, and they started analyzing it. And this is what the headlines start saying. Meteorite that slammed into New Jersey home may solve the mystery of life on Earth, that it came to seed Earth. Rock from space packed with evidence that asteroids planted seeds of life. Now, let's be scientific. Rock from space packed with amino acids, with things that are building blocks of life. Fact. That asteroids planted seeds of life on Earth, that is fiction. That is their interpretation. That is not science. And there is an alternate explanation that is based on all the evidence. So this is a quote here. Hillsborough meteorite adds a new chapter to that idea. It shows the chemistry behind life's building blocks was not confined to a few special asteroids, which they've already found it on, but was also at work inside this common class of space rock. The little dinky rocks have it too, driven by liquid water and shaped by brines, salt water predicted by the hydroplate theory ejected salt water from the subterranean chamber, liquid water, then preserved in rock. The delivery of these molecules by such asteroids, the authors write, could have been an important source of the prebiotic organic inventory that led to the emergence of life on Earth. So this is what all of the kids are going to be taught going through all the school system into universities. We now have proof that life started on Earth because the asteroids and comets that smacked into the Earth in the past brought the building blocks of life to Earth. They can't create the building blocks of amino acids, nucleotides by time and chance here on Earth on the life planet under ideal conditions, and they think that it happened in space. A meteorite that punched through a New Jersey home in 2024 is the first witnessed fall of its kind to show geochemical evidence of ancient saltwater brines inside its parent asteroid. It's the first meteorite that came to Earth without us going and getting on an asteroid, but the asteroids were, the headlines for Bennu and Ryugu were the same. These things came from an ancient saltwatery world. Earth is the parent asteroid mentioned in this article. The data shows that Hillsborough meteorite contained a diverse suite of carbon-bearing compounds, amino acids, water brines, and other prebiotic molecules, is what the article said. HPT interpretation: complex organic molecules are being found on every meteorite, every asteroid, every comet that has been sampled. And imagine this, the total sample weight, mass, of every single space project that's gone to collect things, starting with Wild-2 comet with the Stardust space probe and Bennu, Ryugu, Hayabusa, they brought back 4.5 ounces. And in all 4.5 ounces, they have found the building blocks of life. And here's the clincher, is that, and this is important before we get into what I'm about to be showing you from Answers in Genesis. They also found on the Ryugu asteroid, when they brought the debris from Ryugu asteroid into the clean room in Japan. When we made our clean room for the OSIRIS-REx probe for the Bennu sample, we spent $10 million on just making a clean room. I'm assuming the Japanese did the same thing. I can't get the number that they spent, but we spent $10 million. And when they opened up the sample chamber inside this clean room, they had bacillus bacteria was found in the clean room from Ryugu. But they are wanting to blame it on a contaminated clean room. Because my conjecture is it was a clean room, and they got it from Ryugu. The bacillus bacteria was on Ryugu. But even an evolutionary scientist would have a hard time making a case for the whole world that not only did amino acids and nucleotides somehow spontaneously, through millions of years of time and chance, decide to come together into these extremely complex organic compounds in the vacuum of space and near absolute zero, but also it just all happened to come together with all the DNA strands necessary to make a bacillus bacteria exactly like what's on Earth.
If you're enjoying Hydroplate Theory University, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel by searching Hydroplate Theory University and clicking our official logo. We're organizing the series into playlists for each chapter of Dr. Walt Brown's book. Right now, we're covering the chapter overviews, and once those are complete, we'll come back and explore each chapter in greater depth. You can also find every episode and chapter at hptuniversity.com. We're still finishing a few parts of the website, but everything will be there soon. Now, let's get back to Hydroplate Theory University.
So they say it's a clean room problem. And I told Dr. Thomas, I told her, I don't think it was a clean room problem. And she looked at me at the bite. She didn't say anything, but she looked at me like shocked that I would say that, because she knows that I was probably coming from a Christian perspective. And Christians have to deny that there was a bacteria there, because then that would say that bacteria formed in space and we don't need God. So she looked at me like she was surprised, but and like she agreed with me that it wasn't a clean room problem. And I spent an hour and a half at this in Nebraska, Great Plains Genesis Forum in Hastings, Nebraska, a little over a year ago, April of 2025, talking about other things that they had found and all the organics, and explain it in detail. And so you can go to these websites that have this presentation, and you can go into detail about the hydroplate theory answer for these things. So this is what the evolutionists interpret. What is the evolutionist interpretation of this data based on their belief in the God of time and chance? And don't let evolutionists say, I believe in science. I don't believe in a God. I don't believe. Yes, they do. They believe in the God of time and chance. They think time and chance can make anything happen, even if it's impossible, because their God can work miracles in violating all the laws of physics. This is what they think. These complex organic molecules were formed by time and chance over billions of years as these objects traveled through the near perfect vacuum and near absolute zero temperatures, except, not near absolute zero when it's facing the sun, depending on how far away they are from the sun, of space. So how does this come together? They are betraying the fact that they believe in the time and chance God and ignore the scientific evidence. Christians have scientific evidence on our side. Young Earth, flood of Noah, Christians have science on our side. What is the non-HPT? The creation scientists, the young Earth, global flood, but reject hydroplate theory, think that Walt Brown's a Lone Ranger doing nothing for the creation movement. What do they think? Well, they gave us their own answer, which we're going to show now. And so this is a presentation, answersingenesis.org. And this is Brian Osborne and his co-host Avery Foley on January 16, 2026, so just a few months ago, responding to an article that said they found human DNA on a distant space rock. And they're talking about what we talked about last week, Bennu and Ryugu. But you have to remember that the articles did not say they found bacteria, even though they did, because they want to blame it on the clean room. So they did find life on Ryugu, if in fact it wasn't a contaminated clean room. And so we're going to listen to this and see what they have to say.
Geneticist Dr. Georgia Prodom from The Ohio State University, and she is the tardigrade enthusiast. Welcome back, Georgia.
The headlines are saying it, but Georgia, was human DNA actually found on a meteorite?
You know, when I saw the headline, I think I laughed out loud because I was like, what? I mean, you talk about clickbait. I know that I clicked on it very quickly.
Yes,
so it got
me too.
me, right? Human DNA most definitely was not found, nor the DNA of any other organism on the meteorite.
What a scam!
And I should mention something else about the headline that isn't accurate either. It wasn't actually a meteorite that the material came from, because meteorites are pieces of asteroids that are actually found on Earth. So instead, this was samples that are collected from two asteroids, Ryugu and Bennu, in space, involving the Japanese spacecraft Hayabusa 2 and the U.S. spacecraft OSIRIS-REx.
Props on pronouncing all that so well. So hence why we said there's nothing accurate about the headline, though.
Exactly. Now, while they didn't find DNA, what they did find was a variety of amino acids, including 14 of the 20 that are used by living things to make proteins, ammonia, formaldehyde, some carbon compounds, salts, and the chemical precursors of nucleotides that are components of DNA and RNA.
So,
and let me just stop there. We're going to keep going, but this is really critical to me. I've been a young earth creationist ever since I was a Christian. AIG and ICR, and the other creationist organizations have for years taught, decades taught, that amino acids, nucleotides for RNA and DNA cannot spontaneously occur anywhere. And now they're going to poo-paw that. Now they can't argue with them being able to come together because they're being found in space. And see, because AIG, ICR, Creation Research Society Quarterly, their magazine Quarterly, CMI in Australia, and everybody else has, for decades, rejected Dr. Brown's theory, they don't have an answer. They are now conceding that, well, they must have come together in space because they're there. Because they don't realize that the life planet ejected the building blocks of life onto the asteroids, comets, and meteorites that hit the Earth. And in fact, this again is the 7th edition of Dr. Brown's book. In 1999, before this was published, but after Walt had already come up with the common asteroid chapter on his website book, because as soon as the 6th edition was printed, the website became the 7th edition. In 1999, I'm asking Walt, I'm going to go see Ken Ham in Colorado. This is right when the Columbine High School massacre occurred, and Ken was there as a guest speaker, and that was my hometown. And so, Walt, I'm going to go take Ken Ham, the Comet and Asteroid chapter, because he's got to know about this. This is critical for the creation science ministry. And so after his lecture to the group there at Arapahoe Community College, grass out in front, I went up with a friend of mine to say, hey, Ken, I have some information from Dr. Brown that you need to know. And this is exactly what he told me. It's documented, actually. I documented it decades ago in letters that are posted at our church's website. And you can go and look at calvarypo.com and search on Is AIG Helping or Hindering Part 1, 2, and 3. And you can read Part 1 was documenting this conversation with Ken Ham, with Ken Ham's boss at the time, who was Australia. AIG started in Australia. And he told me, oh, Walt Brown, that Lone Ranger that's doing nothing for the creation movement, he better get on board with what we're doing. He believes that mammoths were blown up into space. How ridiculous. And I told him, you don't understand what he's saying. You should read this. And now here we are, 26 years later, 27 years later, compromising on a major issue because they don't have the hydroplate theory, because Walt Brown was not a Lone Ranger doing nothing for the creation movement. He was the genius in the neighborhood that if people would have listened, we would have been telling our professors, our teachers, everybody else, oh no, when they go on to comets and asteroids, they're going to find everything Dr. Brown is predicting. And they would have called us nutcases until now. And now they would have been saying, how did you know? Well, because we read the Bible. And because Dr. Brown worked off of the Bible instead of the CPT people that worked off evolution to come up with a flood that doesn't flood the whole world at one time. Tsunamis don't flood the world at one time. And so we should have stuck with the Bible. So here's its continuing.
No living organisms.
Correct. I mean,
no living organisms except for the bacteria. They're now holding their hat on. There's no living.
when you think about it, the idea of there being living things in space, especially on something like an asteroid, is just not plausible. I mean, we're talking extremely cold temperatures, radiation, lack of oxygen, and the vacuum of space. There's no atmospheric pressure. In fact, I can only think of a few things from Earth that have survived in the vacuum of outer space for any length of time, including some microbes and my personal favorite, the tardigrades.
Some microbes and bacteria. Bacillus bacteria is extremely robust. It can go into a hibernating environment. And a guy in our church, a doctorate, he was a mechanical engineering doctorate, became a medical doctor, surgeon, and he did a master's thesis for Boeing when he was working for Boeing about how to make clean rooms for stuff coming back from Mars and dealing with bacteria from Earth that could contaminate a clean room. If we brought, and therefore we have to be so careful to make sure it's clean. Bacillus bacteria found on Ryugu can go into a hibernating state on an asteroid for thousands of years.
I was going to say, wait, the tardigrade can survive those things.
Yep. But even tardigrades were living things on Earth before ever venturing on spacecrafts into space.
True.
They certainly didn't evolve by random chance processes and becoming living things in space.
So many of the things they found on these asteroids are used by living things, but just having those there does not equate to life. Back in Genesis, we read that God created all living things during creation week in 6 days, just 6,000 years ago. And everything today is a descendant of those original created kinds.
Yeah, and life takes more than just mixing chemicals together. It takes an intelligent designer, and the only one intelligent enough to design life is the omnipotent, omniscient creator God.
That's right.
And it takes more than mixing chemicals together to get amino acids and nucleotides, which this entire episode of this podcast, which goes on for another 10, 15 minutes, which I'll let you watch on your own, ignores that all the amino acids and nucleotides, which they're conceding they found, also takes more than just mixing chemicals together. But they don't even address that. So it really is something to me that we have, that we've missed this opportunity that we should have had for 20 some years. And so I don't want the audience to be deceived, even by our own creationist organizations that have rejected the hydroplate theory. They're not going to have answers from Genesis about what they're finding. They're not going to have answers of scientific answers from what they're finding. And when they do go, if they do go public by going to more asteroids, more comets, bringing back more debris and finding out they get bacillus culturing, coming out of spore phase and culturing in their labs, they're going to say, well, actually, we found life in space. And then what are the non-HPT people going to say about that? Our interpretation is what I've been giving you. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth and all the life that's on it. Genesis 1, John 1, Colossians 1, Hebrews 1, and that the life planet Earth jettisoned the building blocks of life into space. No, Ken Ham, I agree with you. A mammoth did not get blown up into space as a mammoth. But when he got accelerated from 0 to 7 miles a second, he turned into bits and pieces of amino acids, nucleotides that are now being found on asteroids. And they know complex organic molecules are on the comet 67P, but they didn't bring it back to Earth. So, but a bacteria being accelerated from 0 to 7 miles a second isn't going to be turned to mush because it has very little mass. It's just going to be accelerated and go on to be part of the debris that's going on to asteroids and comets. And 2,000 years later, the crust ruptured and sent it up into space. And everything we're finding are by the known laws of physics. And Genesis 7 and 8 tells us what happens. Asteroids, comets, meteorites did not seed Earth with life. The Earth jettisoned life into space. The building blocks will continue to be found. And here's a prediction of hydroplate theory. Walt's not here to do it. Bill and I and Doug and everybody else will do it for him. No matter where you go, asteroids, comets, meteorites are going to find evidences of amino acids, nucleotides common to life on Earth, and even find bacteria. And planet Mars, because it was impacted by asteroids and comets, and its 2 moons, which even the secular people say Mars captured their moons. You can only capture those moons if there was an atmosphere around Mars. That atmosphere around Mars was the atmosphere of the asteroids and comets that crashed into Mars. And that's what allowed them to capture the moons. And the moons are also going to have nucleotides, amino acids on them. And some asteroids are coming back to hit Earth someday from the Bible. Very reliable source. Revelation 8:8-9. Then the second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire. Doesn't say an asteroid, but that would be the description of an asteroid coming into the Earth. Was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea, we don't know which sea. Could have been the Mediterranean Sea. It could be the Indian Ocean Sea. We don't know. And a third of the sea became blood, and a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. So something hits a sea that causes the animals to die and the ships to die. That's what would happen if an asteroid, even if an asteroid is coming back as a rock pile and hitting that one area, it would do that. And some asteroids are coming back to hit the Earth someday. Revelation, another verse in Revelation, a third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch. Again, sounds like an asteroid. And it fell on the rivers and springs of water. The name of the star was Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the water because it was made bitter. And for years, I've been saying that my understanding of this would be if you have an asteroid hits the water, it would kill the people in ships and animals in the water, the fish. But if one hits on the land, in large parts of the world today, if you have something that hit on the land where there was reactor plants, we've already learned from Japan and the other melted down reactor plants in Pennsylvania and in Fukushima in Japan, Pennsylvania, 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl in Russia. You have a massive ejection of fuel, spent fuel, highly radioactive. And if it got into the water table as a result of an asteroid hit, people would be drinking water and they would die because of the water being made bitter. That's my conjecture. We'll see what happens when it really takes place. There is an asteroid, Apophis, which will make a close approach to Earth on Friday, April 13th, 2029. 3 years, a little less than 3 years. The 335 meter, 1,100 feet rock is going to pass just 19 to 20,000 miles away from Earth's surface, which is inside the orbit of our geostationary communication satellite. So when this asteroid comes, it could take out some of our geostationary satellites. It's going to come that close. If it were to hit the Earth, it would cause a massive regional disaster. The impact would release, I asked AI to give this answer. The impact would release energy equal to 1,000 megatons of TNT. So 1,001 megaton bombs. It would destroy a large metropolitan area, flatten forests for hundreds of miles, and cause climate changes. They're saying right now it's going to miss us. But if it gets a gravity nudge by something that we don't see, it could change it, because it only has to change it a few seconds in its orbit to be able to hit us. And here's the interesting thing to me. Recently, like 2 weeks ago, an article came out that says that Apophis is a contact binary asteroid floating rock pile. So they're now conceding that what they're seeing out there are floating rock piles. Now, I don't know how they said it was floating. I think it's just because they know everything is a floating rock pile, but they were able to determine that it is a contact binary asteroid, which they can't explain. Only hydroplate theory can. So, in summary, to our introduction to the asteroid, meteorites, and TNO chapter, which God are you going to serve, or are you serving? I hope everybody that's out there that's a Christian is saying, I'm going to serve Jesus. And I have all these reasons why I need to not even question my Bible anymore. I have the science on my side. I'm not going to let my professor mess with me anymore. They should be crawling under their desk and apologizing for not giving me answers from science about what they see. And only hydroplate theory can give me answers. Thank you, Jesus, for Walt Brown. Thank you that he has now strengthened my faith, that the evidence supports the biblical account. I hope so, because otherwise because the one who so loved you that he sent Jesus into the world to make a way for you to be saved from sin. That's the one I hope everybody's going to choose. Worship the God who so loved us. He created this beautiful world, but with everything that is just so awesome. And yet it's corrupted by man. But he promises to send us to a place where there's no corruption, no sin, no suffering. All the tears are wiped away. If we humble ourselves and say, God, I want you to be the Lord of my life. I want to stop being so prideful to reject you as my Lord. So I hope everybody's worshiping Jesus as your Savior, because the alternative is to worship the God of time and chance, who has been invented by those who want to deceive you, are deceiving you. Hopefully that deception ends soon. That you would repent of listening to lies, just so that you could get rid of a God that you would have to answer to, because he is God. And the Bible says that every knee is going to bow and every tongue is going to confess that Jesus is Lord. And it's just, you do it here and you have everlasting life. You do it at the judgment seat of God, and it's going to be a terrible day. Bow now and confess Jesus as your Savior. Turn away from the lies of this world. If you go to our calvarypo.com, go to the YouTube link, go to our playlist, Comets, Asteroids, and TNO playlist, you'll see many other presentations I've given, some years and years ago, and you can binge watch on other information. Final statement for those that want to listen to the CPT crowd saying what Walt Brown says is impossible. Lord Kelvin in 1895 was quoted as saying, heavier, and he was like a brilliant scientist. We named a temperature scale off of him, how many degrees Kelvin. But he said, in his ignorance, heavier than air flying machines are impossible. Well, then the Wright brothers come along. They understand the physics of, the Bernoulli equation and the airfoil of a wing on a plane. And now it's like him saying that with a 747 over his head would change his mind. Well, the main detractor of the hydroplate theory, who deceived Ken Ham in 1999 by telling Ken Ham that Walt Brown was doing nothing for the creation movement, John Baumgartner, he is the heaviest insolent towards people that believe in the hydroplate theory. And he says that the idea that the Earth jettisoned material into space is absurd. He says the energy source invoked for accomplishing this astonishing feat is sheer fantasy. Well, just like the 747 over Lord Kelvin's head, the nucleotides, amino acids, bacteria found all over space is the equivalent of the 747. Dr. Baumgartner, I hope someday will change in his attitude and he'll turn away from his theory that's not biblical and not scientific. And I hope for Ken Ham too. And the answers in Genesis. So far, ICR has switched. They're carrying the 9th edition of Dr. Brown's book. I hope the other creation organizations realize that if we continue to make excuses for amino acids and nucleotides not being in space when we taught that it's impossible for them to come by time and chance, that we are really going to lose a huge argument unless we get to the biblical alternative, which is the fountains of the great deep ruptured and the windows of heaven were open. Thanks for joining us and hope you'll be able to be here next week for another podcast. God bless you and keep you in his care and humble yourself before God. You'll never regret it. God bless you.
Thank you for viewing this episode of Hydroplate Theory University. We hope you'll return for future episodes. Please like and subscribe, spread the word, and be sure to visit creationscience.com, where you can find more great hydroplate resources.